Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for March the 8th. Today we are reading together Psalm number 30. The 30th Psalm is subtitled in my Bible, Joy in the Morning. We are told that it is a psalm, a dedication song for the house. The song is of David. That might be a little weird for us, wondering about what it means to be of the house. Remember, David was not the one to build the house for God. He was not the one to build the temple. So it seems that this probably, if we understand the house to be the temple, this would have been a psalm or a song. I guess those words are kind of interchangeable, but this was a song that was written in preparation for the dedication of the temple. So let's read this psalm together, which is a psalm, I believe, rightly identified as a thanksgiving and praise psalm. Thanksgiving and praise psalm. Let's note that here in Psalm number 30, beginning in verse number 1. Psalm number 30 in verse number 1. I will exalt you, Yahweh, because you have lifted me up and have not allowed my enemies to triumph over me. Yahweh, my God, I cried to you for help, and you helped me. Yahweh, you brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. Sing to Yahweh, you his faithful ones, and praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor a lifetime. Weeping may stay overnight, but there is joy in the morning. When I was secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Yahweh, when you showed your favor, you made me stand like a strong mountain. When you hid your face, I was terrified. Yahweh, I called to you. I sought favor from my Lord. What gain is there in my death if I go down to the pits? Will the dust praise you? Will it proclaim your truth? Yahweh, listen and be gracious to me. Yahweh, be my helper. You turned my lament into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, so that I can sing to you and not be silent. Yahweh, Yahweh, my God, I will praise you forever. Psalm number 30. Again, this, I believe, is a thanksgiving and praise psalm. Again, the superscription tells us this would be probably a psalm that was written ahead of time for David, written ahead of time by David for those to use in worship of the temple or worship within the temple. This would be from David's perspective, it seemed to be a very experiential psalm where there was something, if we understand verses 1 through 3 to be a particular moment in David's life, which we don't know exactly what it was. There was some moment, it seems, in David's life in which he had, well, you might say, one foot in the grave, that things were looking very dim for the king. Yet, notice the language that we have in verses 1 through 3. I exalt you, Yahweh, because you have lifted me up. The idea of exalt and lifted up those are basically synonymous terms. So we might say that I lift you up, Yahweh, because you have lifted me up. The idea of lifting up here, very literally, is like lifting water up with a bucket. So you can imagine David here being in a very rough water situation where danger is all around him. You might imagine this in your mind as someone who is lost out at sea and they're just trying to tread water and stay alive, and the rescue helicopter comes and drops the bucket down in the water and they will scoot them up and rescue them. And that's the idea here that David has, that I was drowning, I was in despair, but you, Yahweh, you lifted me up, and you have not allowed. What was the sea? Well, the sea was his enemies. The danger was his enemies. You have not allowed my enemies to triumph over me. You lifted me above my enemies so that they were not over me. Yahweh, I cried to you, and you healed me. You brought me up from Sheol. You spared me from among those going down to the pit. So what's the constant imagery that's given here is David being lifted up. David being raised, David being rescued. Again, it seems as if he has one foot in the grave, But Yahweh serves here as the first responder. I really like what one writer says, that Yahweh should be, as he was to David, our first responder and our last resort. That he is the one to whom we go to in these moments of absolute distress in order to find comfort, peace, and rescue. Again, Yahweh lifts up David, rescues him, brings him up from having one foot in the grave. And because of that, David's response is to lift him up, to exalt him as the great God. So, with this being David's experience, verse number 4, sing to Yahweh, you his faithful ones, and praise his holy name. I'm doing this because of what Yahweh has done for me, and you need to do the same. You need to do the same because you need to recognize these truths are true for you, just as they were for me. Yes, his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor a lifetime. Weeping may stay overnight, but there is joy in the morning. I think about Exodus chapter 34. In Exodus chapter 34, this is the discussion about the ramifications of sin. Exodus 34 and verses 6 and 7. Notice the language that is said here. Yahweh passed in front of him, passed in front of, let's see here, Moses, I believe, passed in front of Moses and proclaimed Yahweh. Yahweh is a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in faithful love, maintaining faithful love to 1,000 generations, but forgiving iniquity, rebellion, and sin. But he will not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the father's iniquity to the children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generation. So notice a difference here. Punishment comes to the third and fourth generation, which that's a whole idea in and of itself to unpack. But punishment comes to the third and fourth generation. But what about his faithful love? His faithful love, forgiveness, that goes to 1,000 generations. Remember what David says here in Psalm 29. His anger lasts only a moment, but his favor a lifetime. His anger for a moment, his favor for a lifetime. Weeping, therefore, may stay overnight. And this is the most temporary term that there is. Very, very temporary, very short time here. Weeping may stay overnight, but there is joy in the morning. So the anger, the weeping, the despondence, that will happen, and that will be here but temporarily, because Yahweh's faithfulness, his favor, the joy that he gives, when it comes, it is long lasting. So when I was secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Yahweh, when you showed your favor, you made me stand like a strong mountain. I will never be shaken. A similar thing is said back in Psalm number 10 and verse number 6. This context is quite different, though, from what we have here in Psalm number 30. Psalm 10 and verse number 6 says that he says to himself, I will never be moved from generation to generation without calamity. Who is this? Well, this is the wicked person. This is the wicked person who puts confidence in self. That person says, I'll never be shaken. But of course, within that psalm, we see that's not the case. They will suffer for that pride and arrogance. But for this person, for David here, when I was secure, I said, I will never be shaken. Well, why? Why would he never be shaken? Well, because of the foundation that he stands upon, which is what? Which is Yahweh. So boasting and confidence in self will lead to downfall, but boasting and confidence in Yahweh, again, in his faithfulness, in his favor, in his grace, in his mercy, that provides a solid foundation in which we will not be shaken. So when we have that confidence in Yahweh, again, we will be able to stand like a strong mountain. Now, conversely, when it feels as if God is not with us, or maybe we have rejected God and rebelled against God, well, when he hides his face from us, when he's not guiding us, when he's not lifting us up, then David says, well, then I'm terrified. I cry out to you. Again, this seems to be going back to the moment of distress that he was involved in, whatever that was in verses 1 through 3. I cried out to you. I sought your favor, and I said, hey, what glory do you get if I die? What gain is there in my death? If I go down to the pit, am I going to praise you from the dust? Am I going to proclaim your truth from the pit? Well, no. No, so Yahweh, again, listen to me. Be my first responder. Also be my last resort. Listen and be gracious to me. Yahweh, be my helper. Notice here that David again, Yahweh is the first responder. Yahweh is the last resort. There is nowhere else for David to turn but to Yahweh. No one else brings rescue. No one else brings restoration. No one else brings the lifting up that Yahweh alone can give, which is why David now at the end of the psalm, he's going to say, I can sing to you and not be silent. Yahweh, my God, I will praise you forever. Why? Well, because of what we saw back in verse number 5, let's see, weeping turns into joy. Verse 11 is expressed as, you turned my lament into dancing. You removed my sackcloth and instead clothed me with gladness. You took me from a place of grief and sadness and moved me into a place of celebration. Again, God is the great reverser. He reverses the fortunes of those who trust in him. David had one foot in the pit, but now he has been lifted up. And in this position of blessing that he has been put in by God, he gives now the proper response. The only thing that David says I can do is praise you. All I can do is praise you. I cannot be silent. I cannot be silent. I can only sing. I can only praise you forever. That to me makes sense why this is about the temple. At the temple, David and the worshiper would come into near the presence of God and lift up what he has done for them. And we were able to do the same. Except for us, we don't have to go to a particular place. Wherever we are, we can do the same thing as David talks about here within the psalm. We too can go to God. We too can call out to him. Let's see. There is verse number 2. There's a little developing pattern here. It begins with a cry out to God for help in verse number 2. Then in verse number 8, Yahweh, I called to you. I sought favor from my Lord. And then it concludes now in verse number 12. Now what I can do is I can sing to you. Not only can I sing to you, but I can praise you. Can you think of a time in your life whenever this was your journey from crying out to God and calling out to God to eventually being able to sing to him and to praise his name for his deliverance, for his graciousness, for his favor, for his loving kindness? I would say if we thought hard enough, we can certainly go back to a time whenever that has been the case. And let's not allow that then to become simply a part of our past. Let's meditate upon that and live with a recognition that God gives reversal to those who seek him out, those who seek his favor. Yes, they might be engaged in weeping. Yes, they might have trouble for a short time. But in the long term, those who trust in Yahweh, those who rely upon his favor, they will be able to do just as David did. Sing to him and not be silent. Praise him forever and ever. If you have any questions or comments about this psalm, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Again, a wonderful psalm. Actually, I had a concluding thought down here. This is a song of reorientation after a disorienting experience and calamity. We all go through those times in our lives. Hopefully this psalm can be a blessing to us, and we might remember this psalm if we find ourselves in any of those moments and allow it to be a blessing to us. But if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. We'll be back again reading on Monday from Psalm number 31, which is a plea for protection. Hope that you'll be able to tune in for that. We are of course, out of town this weekend. And Craig will be presenting the lesson during the worship assembly at 11 on Sunday. I know that will be a blessing to the church, and I'm glad that he has the opportunity. I know he'll do a great job. But we will be reading again on Monday, again, Psalm 31, a plea for protection. Hope that you'll be able to tune in then. Have a great rest of your weekend. May God bless you in all that you do, and we'll be back at it again on Monday. Take care, and God bless.